The champagne tasted like expensive regret, and I was drowning in it. Standing in the corner of this overpriced high-rise party room, watching my wife Sienna hold court like some kind of social media queen, I wondered how the hell I'd ended up here. The view of the harbor was spectacular, sure, but not spectacular enough to make me forget that I'd rather be under the hood of a '92 Camaro than listening to these people talk about their latest vacation to the Hamptons. "Eli, you're being antisocial again," Sienna called out, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she wanted to embarrass me in public. "Come tell everyone about your exciting day fixing transmissions." The group around her laughed. Not with me, mind you, at me. There's a difference, and after 12 years of marriage, I'd learned to spot it from across a crowded room. I took another sip of champagne and stayed put. Let her perform. She was good at it. "Honestly," Sienna continued, gesturing dramatically with her wine glass, "sometimes I think I need a new marriage. This one's practically trash at this point." The laughter got louder. Brent Calloway, her law firm partner, put his hand on her lower back in a way that lasted just a beat too long. Lila Morrison, Sienna's best friend since college, whispered something to Zach Peters, my former drinking buddy who'd somehow migrated into Sienna's orbit over the past year. That's when something clicked in my brain. Maybe it was the champagne, or maybe it was just 12 years of being the punchline finally catching up with me. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the manila envelope I'd been carrying around for 3 weeks. "Glad we finally agree," I said, walking over to the group. My voice cut through their laughter like a wrench through sheet metal. I handed Sienna the envelope. Divorce papers, already signed on my end. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. Sienna's face went through about 5 different expressions in 2 seconds. Shock, anger, embarrassment, panic, and finally that fake laugh she used when she was buying time to think. "Very funny, Eli," she said, but her voice cracked just enough for everyone to notice. Always the comedian. "Read them," I said simply. "Filed yesterday. My lawyer says it should be pretty straightforward since we kept separate accounts and the house is in my name." Brent stepped forward, puffing up like some kind of peacock. "Now wait just a minute." "You wait," I said, not even looking at him. "This doesn't concern you, Brent, yet." That last word hung in the air like smoke from a backfiring engine. Margot Chen, the only person in this room I actually respected, appeared at my elbow with a fresh beer. She owned the Anchor, the dive bar down by the marina, where normal people went to drink normal beer and complain about normal problems. "About time, Eli," she said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear. "You don't know the half of it. She's been screwing her way through your friends for years." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest, but I kept my face neutral. 12 years of marriage to a lawyer teaches you how to hide your reactions. I looked around the room one more time, at Sienna, still clutching the envelope like it might bite her, at Brent, whose face had gone pale under his fake tan, at Lila, who was already pulling out her phone, probably to start spreading gossip before the night was over, at Zach, who couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Thanks for the party," I said to no one in particular. "I'll see myself out." I walked toward the elevator, and with every step, I could feel the whispers starting behind me. By the time the doors closed, the room was buzzing like a disturbed hornet's nest. As the elevator descended toward the parking garage, I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to Vic, my lead mechanic. "Change the locks on the house. All of them. Tonight." Then I turned off my phone and drove home through the empty streets, wondering what the hell I was going to do with the rest of my life. I got my answer when I pulled into my driveway at 2:47 a.m. and saw Sienna's Mercedes parked sideways across the front lawn, her high heels scattered on the walkway, and every light in the house blazing like Christmas morning. She was home, and she was pissed. This was going to be interesting. I slept in my truck. Not because I was afraid of Sienna, though a cornered lawyer can be more dangerous than a rattlesnake with a law degree, but because I wanted to see what she'd do when she realized the locks had been changed. At 6:15 a.m., I got my answer. The front door flew open and Sienna stumbled out, still wearing her party dress from last night. Mascara streaked down her cheeks like war paint. She was dragging 2 suitcases and a garment bag, cursing under her breath in words that would make a sailor blush. "Elliot Porter!" she screamed at the house, as if the building itself had personally wronged her. "I know you're in there!" I rolled down my truck window. "I'm right here, Sienna." She spun around, nearly tripping over her own luggage. "You changed the locks? Seriously? That's my house too." "Actually, it's not," I said, pulling out my phone to show her a photo of the deed. "Bought it 3 years before we got married. Never added your name. My lawyer confirmed it yesterday." Her face went through that same cycle of expressions from the night before, but this time, anger won out. "You can't just throw me out. I have rights." "You have the right to find somewhere else to live," I said, climbing out of the truck. "I left your stuff in the guest room. Vic packed it up real nice." As if on cue, Vic's tow truck pulled into the driveway. Vincent, Vic Kowalski, had been working for me for 8 years, ever since he got out of the army. He was built like a brick wall and had the personality of a golden retriever who'd learned how to use power tools. "Morning, Mrs. Porter," he said cheerfully, hopping out of the truck. "Got the rest of your things right here." He started unloading boxes and hanging bags with military precision, stacking them neatly on the front lawn. "This is insane," Sienna said, but she was already loading things into her Mercedes. "You can't just decide our marriage is over without discussing it." "I tried discussing it," I said. "For about 3 years. You were usually too busy to listen. Too busy building a career, supporting this family." "Supporting your lifestyle, you mean?" Vic cleared his throat. "Boss, should I tell her about the phone?" Sienna froze. "What phone?" I pulled her burner phone out of my pocket, the one I'd found in her gym bag when I was looking for the spare car keys yesterday. The one with all the text messages and photos that painted a very clear picture of what my wife had been doing with her free time. "This phone," I said. The color drained from her face. "Brent's got some interesting ideas about what you two should do on your next business trip to Boston," I continued. "Very creative, very detailed, very much not the kind of thing married people should be texting to their co-workers." Sienna lunged for the phone, but I pulled it back. "There's more," I said. "Messages from Dr. Harrison from your doctor's office, and that personal trainer at your gym, and someone named Jake who apparently sells real estate and other services." "Eli, please." "The divorce papers are already filed," I said. "You can contest them if you want, but these messages might make that complicated. Adultery's still grounds in this state." Vic was pretending to organize boxes, but I could see him trying not to smile. He'd never liked Sienna, mostly because she treated him like furniture whenever she came by the garage. "Where am I supposed to go?" Sienna asked, and for a moment she sounded like the woman I'd married instead of the stranger she'd become. "Brent's got a nice place downtown," I said. "Or there's that hotel by the courthouse. Seems appropriate." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. She was a good lawyer, and good lawyers always have a plan B. "This isn't over, Eli," she said finally. "I'll fight this. I'll take you for everything you're worth." "Good luck with that," I said. "My net worth is a garage, a 12-year-old truck, and a house with a mortgage, plus whatever you can get for a bunch of broken-down cars and rusty tools." She loaded the last of her boxes into the Mercedes and slammed the trunk hard enough to rattle the windows. "You'll regret this," she said. "I already regret it," I said. "I regret waiting this long." She drove off, tires squealing on the asphalt, leaving black marks on the street like a signature. Vic and I watched until her taillights disappeared around the corner. "So," he said, "what now, boss?" "Now," I said, "we go to work, and we wait to see what she does next." "Think she'll cause trouble?" I looked at the skid marks on the street, then at the phone still in my hand with its treasure trove of incriminating evidence. "Vic," I said, "I think trouble's just getting started." Mrs. Firth was sitting on her porch when I got home from the garage that evening, rocking in her chair like she'd been waiting for me all day. At 83, Eleanor Firth had lived in the house next door for longer than I'd been alive, and she saw everything that happened on our street. Everything. "Evening, Eli," she called out as I climbed out of my truck. "Heard you had some excitement this morning." "News travels fast around here," I said, walking over to her fence. "Travels faster when someone's screaming loud enough to wake the dead at 6 in the morning," she said with a chuckle. "About time, if you ask me." "Nobody asked you, Mrs. Firth." "Well, I'm telling you anyway. That woman's been having visitors while you're at work. Regular as clockwork. Tuesdays and Thursdays mostly. Sometimes Wednesdays if she's feeling ambitious." I stopped walking. "What kind of visitors?" "The kind that don't park out front," she said. "The kind that use your back driveway and come in through the kitchen door like they own the place." "How long?" "Couple years. Maybe more. Started with that lawyer fellow, the pretty one with the fancy car. Then the doctor. Then some others." She rocked forward in her chair. "I keep a list, if you're interested." "You keep a list of my wife's affairs?" "I keep a list of everything interesting that happens on this street," she said. "Your wife just happened to be the most interesting thing for a while." She pulled a small notebook out of her sweater pocket and handed it to me. The pages were covered in her neat handwriting, dates and times and descriptions that read like a surveillance report. "Tuesday, March 15th, 2:30 p.m. Lawyer fellow, stayed until 4:15. Thursday, March 17th, 1:45 p.m. Dr. Harrison, left at 3:20, looked disheveled. Wednesday, March 23rd, new fellow, real estate maybe, stayed late, didn't leave until after 6. Page after page of evidence, documented by an old woman who treated neighborhood gossip like a science. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Wasn't my place," she said. "Besides, figured you knew. Most men know, deep down. They just don't want to admit it." I flipped through more pages. The entries went back almost 3 years, starting just a few months after Sienna made partner at her firm. "Can I keep this?" "Course you can. I made copies." She smiled. "I wasn't born yesterday, Eli. I know how these things work." I walked home with Mrs. Firth's notebook in my pocket, feeling like I was carrying a loaded gun. 3 years of documented adultery, times and dates and descriptions detailed enough to hold up in court. Inside the house, everything felt different. Quieter, emptier, but in a good way, like when you finally clean out a closet that's been cluttered for years. I made a sandwich and sat at the kitchen table, reading through Mrs. Firth's notes more carefully. The pattern was clear. Sienna had been systematically cheating on me with half the professional men in town, and she'd been using our house to do it. My phone buzzed. Text message from Margot. "Heard about this morning. Come by the Anchor when you're ready to talk." I drove down to the Marina District, where the Anchor sat like a weathered lighthouse among the trendy seafood restaurants and boutique shops that had been creeping in over the past few years. The bar was exactly what it looked like from the outside: dark wood, dim lights, and the kind of atmosphere where people minded their own business unless you wanted them to mind yours. Margot was behind the bar, polishing glasses with the focused attention of someone who'd been doing it for 20 years. She was one of those women who'd probably been beautiful when she was younger and had aged into something better, handsome, confident, and completely unimpressed by anyone's bullshit. "Eli," she said, sliding a beer across the bar without being asked, "you look like hell." "Feel worse," I said, taking a long drink. "Margot, what you said last night about Sienna." "Every word was true," she said. "Sit down. Let me tell you a story." I sat. "About 6 months ago, your wife and Brent Calloway came in here after work, had a few drinks, got a little handsy, started talking like they were the only people in the room. She was bragging about keeping you around for the alimony payments when she finally decided to divorce you. Alimony? From what? The garage barely breaks even. That's what I thought, Margot said. But apparently she's been telling people you're worth more than you look. Something about property investments and a trust fund. I laughed, but it came out bitter. Property investments? I own a garage and a house with a mortgage. And the only trust fund I've got is the $500 I keep in a coffee can for emergencies. Well, she's been telling a different story, and she's been telling it to a lot of people. Margot leaned across the bar, lowering her voice. Eli, she's been working an angle, making you look like the cheap husband who won't spend money on his successful wife, while she's actually planning to take you for everything she thinks you're worth. Except I'm not worth anything. Exactly. But she doesn't know that, and neither do her friends. The pieces were starting to fit together in my head, forming a picture I didn't like but was beginning to understand. She's been setting me up, I said. For years, Margot confirmed. The affairs, the public humiliation, the whole performance, it's all been leading up to a divorce where she comes out looking like the victim of a cheap, controlling husband. I finished my beer and stared at the empty bottle. Margot, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Shoot. How many people in town know about her affairs? Margot smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Honey, she said, everybody knows. The only person who didn't know was you. I drove home through streets that looked different now, like I was seeing them through new eyes. Every corner, every building, every face I passed, they all knew. They'd all been watching my marriage fall apart from the front row while I was stumbling around in the dark. But now I wasn't in the dark anymore, and I was starting to get ideas about what to do with all this new information. Brent Calloway was waiting for me in the parking lot of my garage the next morning, leaning against his BMW like he owned the place. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month, and his smile was the kind that made you want to check your wallet to make sure it was still there. Eli, he said as I climbed out of my truck, we need to talk. Do we? I said, walking past him toward the garage entrance. About Sienna, about this divorce nonsense. I stopped and turned around. What about it? Look, I know you're upset, Brent said, following me. But you're making a mistake. Sienna loves you. This whole thing is just a misunderstanding. Which part's the misunderstanding? I asked. The part where she's been sleeping with you for 2 years? Or the part where she called our marriage trash in front of 30 people? His smile faltered just a bit. I don't know what you think you know. I know about the burner phone, I said. I know about the Tuesday and Thursday visits. I know about Boston and the photos and that thing you two did in your office that would probably get you both fired if the senior partners found out. Now his smile disappeared completely. You're bluffing. I pulled out Sienna's phone and scrolled to one of their more explicit conversations. Tuesday, October 15th, 2:47 p.m. You texted her a photo of your office couch with the message, "Ready for our meeting." She responded with, "Okay, stop," Brent said quickly, looking around the parking lot. "What do you want?" "I want you to stay away from my wife." "She's not your wife anymore. You filed for divorce, remember? Until the papers are signed, she's still married to me. And until they're signed, you're still committing adultery with a married woman. I'm pretty sure the State Bar Association has opinions about that kind of behavior." Brent stepped closer and I could smell his cologne, something expensive and aggressive that probably had a name like Conquest or Dominance. "You don't want to threaten me, Eli," he said. "I've got resources you can't imagine. I can make your life very complicated." "More complicated than it already is?" "Much more complicated." I looked at him for a long moment, this perfectly groomed predator in his perfect suit making perfect threats, and something inside me just snapped. "Get off my property," I said. "Or what?" "Or I'll throw you off." He laughed. "You and what army?" That's when Vic walked out of the garage, all 6'4", 250 pounds of him, wiping grease off his hands with a rag that had seen better days. "Problem, boss?" he asked. "Mr. Calloway was just leaving," I said. Brent looked at Vic, then at me, then back at Vic. His jaw tightened. "This isn't over," he said. "Yeah, it is," I said. He got in his BMW and drove off fast enough to leave rubber on the asphalt. "Friend of yours?" Vic asked. "Sienna's boyfriend." "Ah. Want me to follow him? Make sure he doesn't come back?" "Nah," I said. "But keep an eye out. I don't think he's done making trouble." I was right. That afternoon, I was under the hood of a Chevy Suburban when I heard tires squealing in the parking lot. I rolled out from under the truck just in time to see Brent's BMW come flying around the corner, heading straight for my truck. I dove behind the Suburban as Brent's car clipped my truck's rear bumper, sending it spinning sideways into a light pole. The BMW kept going, tires smoking as it headed for the street. "Son of a bitch," I said, running for Vic's tow truck. The keys were in the ignition. Vic always left them there in case we needed to move it quickly. I fired up the engine and took off after Brent, who was already 3 blocks ahead and driving like a maniac. The tow truck wasn't built for speed, but it was built like a tank, and I knew these streets better than some tourist lawyer from the fancy part of town. I took a shortcut through the industrial district, cutting him off at the intersection by the old textile mill. Brent saw me coming and tried to swerve around me, but I blocked him, forcing him into the dead-end alley behind the mill. He hit the brakes hard, stopping just short of the brick wall at the end of the alley. I parked the tow truck sideways across the alley entrance, blocking his exit, and climbed out. Brent was already out of his car, his perfect suit rumpled, his perfect hair messed up, his perfect composure completely shot. "You're insane," he shouted. "That's attempted murder." "That's funny," I said, walking toward him. "I was going to say the same thing about you ramming my truck." "I barely touched your truck." "Tell that to my insurance company." He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police." "Good idea," I said. "I'm sure they'll be very interested in the security footage from my garage. Shows you trying to run me down pretty clearly." He hesitated, thumb hovering over his phone screen. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to pay for the damage to my truck. You're going to stay away from my garage, my house, and my wife, and you're going to stop making threats." "And if I don't?" I gestured toward the tow truck. "Then I'll hook your BMW up to my truck and drag it through every pothole between here and the marina. See how pretty it looks after that." He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him trying to decide whether I was bluffing. I wasn't. "This is extortion," he said finally. "This is consequences," I said. "Something you're apparently not used to." A police cruiser turned into the alley, lights flashing. Detective Ray Janes climbed out, a guy I'd known since high school, back when he was just Ray and I was just Eli, and we both thought we'd end up working construction like our fathers. "Eli," he said, "got a call about a disturbance." "Just a little misunderstanding," I said. "Mr. Calloway here accidentally backed into my truck and we were discussing how to handle it." Ray looked at Brent, then at the tow truck blocking the alley, then at me. "That right, Mr. Calloway?" Brent's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. "Yes," he said finally. "An accident." "Good," Ray said. "Accidents happen, long as nobody's hurt and everybody's willing to work it out like adults." He looked at me. "We good here, Eli?" "We're good," I said. Ray nodded and got back in his cruiser. "Drive safe, gentlemen." After he left, I moved the tow truck and let Brent drive away, but not before he handed me a business card with his insurance information. "This isn't over," he said for the second time that day. "Keep telling yourself that," I said. But as I watched him drive away, I knew he was right. It wasn't over. It was just getting started. 3 weeks later, Sienna made her move. The annual charity gala for the Children's Hospital was the kind of event where everyone who mattered in town showed up to see and be seen, write tax-deductible checks, and pretend they cared about something other than their own social standing. It was held at the Grand Harbor Hotel, the fanciest place in the city, and tickets cost more than most people made in a week. I wasn't planning to go. I'd never gone before. Sienna usually attended these things with her work friends, claiming I'd be out of place among the lawyers and doctors and business owners who made up the city's social elite. But Margot had other ideas. "You need to be there," she said, sliding a ticket across the bar at the Anchor. "Trust me." Why would I want to spend $300 to watch rich people congratulate themselves for giving away money they'll never miss? "Because Sienna's planning something," Margot said, "and you need to be there to stop it." "What kind of something?" "The kind that involves her standing up in front of everyone and making a speech about domestic abuse and controlling husbands." I stared at the ticket. "She's going to claim I abused her?" "Word is, she's going to paint herself as the brave victim who finally found the courage to leave her abusive marriage. Very inspiring, very sympathetic, very likely to get her a lot of support in the divorce proceedings." But I never touched her, never even raised my voice most of the time. "You think that matters? She's a lawyer, Eli. She knows how to tell a story. And she's got Brent backing her up, plus half the people who were at that party where you served her the divorce papers." I picked up the ticket. What am I supposed to do? Stand up and call her a liar in front of 300 people? "Something like that," Margot said, "but smarter." The night of the gala, I put on my only suit, the one I'd worn to my wedding 12 years ago, and drove to the Grand Harbor Hotel. The parking lot was full of luxury cars that cost more than my house, and the lobby was packed with people who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. I felt like a fraud, but I'd felt like a fraud at most social events for the past 12 years, so that was nothing new. The ballroom was decorated like something out of a fairy tale, all white flowers and gold ribbon and crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than my entire garage. I found a table in the back and tried to blend in with the waitstaff. Sienna was at the head table, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my truck payment, sitting between Brent and the hospital's chief administrator. She looked beautiful and tragic and perfectly composed, exactly the image she wanted to project. The evening progressed through the usual routine: cocktails, dinner, speeches from various hospital officials and major donors. I sat in the back, nursing a beer and waiting for whatever Sienna had planned. I didn't have to wait long. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies announced, "we have a special presentation this evening from one of our most dedicated supporters, attorney Sienna Porter." The room applauded as Sienna stood up and walked to the podium. She looked out over the crowd with the kind of confident smile that had probably won her a dozen cases. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying easily through the room. "I'm honored to be here tonight supporting such an important cause, but I'm not here just as a donor or a volunteer. I'm here as someone who understands what it means to suffer in silence." The room got quieter, more attentive. For years, I lived in a marriage that looked perfect from the outside. But behind closed doors, I was trapped in a relationship with a man who controlled every aspect of my life, who isolated me from my friends, who monitored my every move, who made me feel worthless and afraid. I felt my hands clench into fists under the table. It took tremendous courage for me to finally break free from that situation, Sienna continued, to file for divorce and start rebuilding my life. But I'm one of the lucky ones. I had resources, education, a career that gave me independence. So many women don't have those advantages. The crowd was eating it up. I could see people nodding, dabbing at their eyes, reaching for their checkbooks. That's why I'm announcing tonight the establishment of the Porter Foundation for Domestic Violence Prevention, with an initial donation of $50,000 to help women escape abusive relationships. The applause was thunderous. Sienna stood at the podium, basking in the adoration, playing the role of the brave survivor to perfection. That's when I stood up. "Excuse me," I said, loud enough to carry over the applause. The room went quiet. Every head turned toward me. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, walking toward the front of the room. But I think there's been some confusion. Sienna's face went pale. Eli, what are you doing here? I'm here to set the record straight, I said, pulling out my phone. See, the thing about telling lies in public is that sometimes the truth has a way of catching up with you. I connected my phone to the room's audio-visual system, a trick Vic had taught me earlier that week. What you just heard was a very moving story, I said to the crowd. Very inspiring, also completely false. The screen behind the podium lit up with a video, security footage from the anchor bar showing Sienna and Brent in intimate conversation. This is my wife 3 months ago, I said, telling her boyfriend how she was planning to divorce me and take me for everything I was worth. The audio was crystal clear, Sienna's voice laughing as she described her plans to paint me as an abusive husband. She's been having affairs for 3 years, I continued, as more footage played. Photos from her burner phone, time-stamped text messages, Mrs. Firth's surveillance notes. With her law partner, with her doctor, with half the professional men in this city, all while living in my house, driving cars I paid for, and planning to destroy my reputation to cover her own tracks. The room was dead silent now. I could see people pulling out their phones, recording everything. The only thing she got right, I said, looking directly at Sienna, is that our marriage was trash. But it wasn't trash because I was controlling or abusive. It was trash because she's a liar and a cheat who thought she could manipulate everyone in this room the same way she manipulated me. Sienna tried to speak, but no words came out. Oh, and about that $50,000 donation, I said. That's interesting, since according to her financial disclosure in our divorce proceedings, she's got about $1,200 in her checking account and a credit card that's maxed out. So I'm curious where that money was supposed to come from. The hospital administrator stood up. Mrs. Porter, is this true? Sienna looked around the room, at the shocked faces, the recording phones, the complete collapse of her carefully constructed narrative. Then she ran. She pushed past me, through the crowd, and out of the ballroom, leaving behind her purse, her dignity, and any hope of salvaging her reputation. Brent tried to follow her, but he was intercepted by several people who apparently had questions about his relationship with his law partner. I walked back to my table, finished my beer, and left through the back exit. In the parking lot, I found Sienna sitting in her car, crying. I tapped on the window. She rolled it down. Why? She asked. Why did you have to humiliate me like that? You humiliated yourself, I said. I just made sure everyone could see it. I loved you, she said. No, I said. You loved what I could do for you. There's a difference. I started to walk away, then turned back. Sienna? What? Glad we finally agree our marriage was trash, but the trash was never me. I left her there and drove home to my empty house, which felt more like home than it had in years. 2 days after the gala, Brent lost his job. The video of Sienna's speech and my response had gone viral locally, racked up over 50,000 views on social media, and been picked up by the regional news stations. The law firm's senior partners, faced with a public relations nightmare and evidence of an inappropriate relationship between 2 of their attorneys, decided to cut their losses. Sienna was suspended pending an internal investigation. Brent was fired outright. I heard about it from Margot, who heard about it from her cousin who worked as a paralegal at a competing firm. Word is they're both pretty much unemployable around here, she said, wiping down the bar at the anchor. Brent's family has money, but they're not happy about the scandal. Cut him off financially until he gets his life together. And Sienna? Sienna's broke, homeless, and friendless. Lila won't return her calls, Zach's pretending he never knew her, and she's been staying at that cheap motel out by the highway. I should have felt satisfied. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? Justice. Consequences. The truth finally coming to light. Instead, I just felt tired. There's something else, Margot said. They're planning to leave town. Tonight, probably. Brent's got a boat at the marina, and word is they're going to sail down the coast to Florida, start over somewhere nobody knows them. Good, I said. Let them go. You sure about that? I looked at her. What do you mean? I mean, they've been telling people this is all your fault, that you set them up, ruined their careers, destroyed their lives for no reason other than spite. People believe that? Some do. Enough to make things uncomfortable for you if they stick around and keep spreading that story. I finished my beer and stood up. Where's his boat? Slip 47 down at the end of the main dock, big white yacht called Precedent. I drove to the marina as the sun was setting, painting the harbor in shades of orange and red that reminded me of the rust on old cars. The docks were mostly empty. It was a Tuesday night in late October, not exactly prime boating weather. I found Slip 47 easily enough. The Precedent was a 40-foot yacht that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years, all gleaming white fiberglass and polished chrome. Very impressive, if you were the kind of person who was impressed by expensive things. Sienna and Brent were on the deck, loading supplies and arguing in the kind of harsh whispers that meant they were trying not to be overheard. Told you this was a stupid idea. Better than staying here and don't even know how to sail this thing. Figured it out as we go? I walked down the dock toward them, my footsteps echoing on the wooden planks. They stopped arguing when they saw me. Eli, Sienna said. What are you doing here? Heard you were leaving town, I said. Thought I'd come say goodbye. Brent stepped forward, trying to look tough, despite the fact that he was wearing a polo shirt and deck shoes that had probably never seen actual deck work. We don't want any trouble, he said. No trouble, I said. Just wanted to return something. I pulled Sienna's burner phone out of my pocket and tossed it onto the boat's deck. Evidence is all copied anyway, I said. Figured you might want the phone back. Sienna picked it up, staring at it like it was a snake. Why? She asked. Why what? Why are you letting us go? You could have us arrested. You could drag this out, make it worse for us. I looked at her. Really looked at her. For the first time in months. She looked older, tired, like someone who'd been running for a long time and was finally running out of places to go. Because I'm not you, I said simply. Brent was fiddling with the boat's controls, trying to start the engine. It coughed, sputtered, and died. Having trouble? I asked. It's fine, he said, trying again. Same result. I walked closer to the boat, looking at the engine compartment. Might want to check your fuel line, I said. Looks like it might be clogged. I don't need your help, Brent said. Suit yourself. I started to walk away, then stopped. Oh, Brent, you might also want to check your registration. Coast Guard's been cracking down on expired paperwork lately. His face went pale. What are you talking about? Nothing, I said. Just something I heard. I was halfway back to my truck when I heard the sirens. 2 Coast Guard cutters were approaching the marina, lights flashing. Behind them, several police cruisers were pulling into the parking lot. I stopped and turned around. Sienna and Brent were standing on the deck of the yacht, watching the approaching boats with expressions of growing panic. Eli! Sienna called out. What did you do? Nothing, I called back. But I might have mentioned to Detective Janes that someone was planning to leave the state before their divorce proceedings were finalized. That's technically fleeing to avoid legal obligations. You bastard! And I might have mentioned to the Coast Guard that someone was planning to take a boat with expired registration into federal waters. That's a pretty serious violation. The Coast Guard cutters were pulling up to the dock now, officers in uniform climbing out. And I definitely mentioned to the IRS that someone might be trying to flee the country to avoid paying taxes on unreported income. They're very interested in that burner phone and all those cash payments you've been receiving, Sienna. Brent tried to start the engine one more time, but it was too late. The Coast Guard officers were already on the dock, walking toward the yacht. Mr. Calloway, Ms. Porter, we need to speak with you. I got in my truck and drove away, leaving them to explain themselves to the authorities. 3 hours later, Margot called me. "They're both in custody," she said. "Coast Guard violations, tax evasion, fleeing to avoid legal proceedings. Brent's family is refusing to post bail. Sienna's got no one to call." "How long will they be in jail?" "Long enough for the divorce to be finalized, the IRS investigation to be completed, and their reputations to be thoroughly destroyed." I sat in my kitchen, looking around at the house that was finally truly mine again. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said. "What?" "She was right about our marriage being trash. I just never realized she was the one who made it that way." "So what now?" Margot asked. "Now," I said, "I get on with my life, without them. Any regrets?" I thought about it for a long moment. "Yeah," I said finally. "I regret waiting so long to take out the trash." 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Sienna got nothing except a criminal record and a reputation that would follow her wherever she went. Brent lost his law license and his family's support. I kept the house, the garage, and my self-respect. Mrs. Firth brought me a casserole to celebrate. "Told you that woman was trouble," she said, settling into a chair at my kitchen table. "You were right," I said. "I'm always right. That's why I keep lists." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. "So," she said, "what's next for you, Eli?" I looked around the kitchen, at the empty spaces where Sienna's things used to be, at the quiet that wasn't lonely anymore, but peaceful. "I'm thinking about getting a dog," I said. "Good idea. Dogs are loyal. Dogs don't cheat on you with lawyers. Dogs don't make jokes about marriages being trash, either." "No," Mrs. Firth said, smiling, "but if they did, at least they'd mean it as a compliment."